Let's say a very good morning to Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Morning. Mike, I've got a challenge for you.
Go on.
Because I'm slightly concerned that Mike's morning glory is turning into Mike's morning glory Monday misery. Please, can you tell me something to cheer me up? Because that list that you just read out there of everything that's gone on over the weekend just left me feeling kind of dead inside. Please
Well,
do something.
I can give you two pieces of good news. One is Katy Perry's being fired into space later, which I think is going to prove us all right. After we won't have to listen to any more of her music, I'm sure she's going to have a very nice time. Only 11 minutes in space, but you know. And Jeff Bezos, I think, is bringing a whole new meaning to sending the wife on a trip. He's putting his own wife on this rocket that he's sending up to space, so he's going to have quite a bit of time to hang out. And also Hull is about to become the new Bordeaux, according to people who know about wine. So how about that?
Okay. That's all right. And maybe we could have some fun making a list of the people, the top 3 people that we would like to send into space. I think I'd start with Jonathan Reynolds.
Definitely.
Is this new regime going to be like the Great British Energy Company, do we think?
Well, I mean Jurgen could probably fit in a bit more work into his working week, because he's not got a lot to do at GB Energy, has he? So maybe he could sort of come along as a co-opted member of the board. But it's terrifying, isn't it, that a guy like Jonathan Reynolds, who literally until about I don't know, 9, 8, 10 months ago, was an opposition MP, not much to write home about, never really done much in his life, didn't really manage to qualify as a solicitor, worked as a councillor, yeah, you know, a bit of a union organiser probably. He's now in charge of one of the biggest industrial companies in Britain.
I mean, all we can do is pray that he has really smart people around him to advise him. And this is always the kind of the weird thing about the way our political system works. You know, people get elected to become MPs, and then if their party wins a majority, they're then in cabinet positions having no knowledge whatsoever, quite often, of the area that they're in charge of. So you've got, you know, I don't mean in this case Wes Streeting is very competent, but, you know, in the past you've had health secretaries that know nothing at all.
Yeah.
We've had chief secretaries of the Treasury with no economic knowledge. I remember many years ago, Andy Burnham was made chief secretary to the Treasury under the last Labour regime, and he hated the job. He didn't know anything about economics. He's the first to admit he was the wrong fit for it. And this, you know, sometimes you can bump along okay with this if you've got really good civil servants. But I don't know about you, Mike, but I don't have a great deal of confidence in our civil service and that they'll do, you know, what needs to be done to make this rescue operation sustainable.
Well, like much of what this government tells us, it's only half the story, isn't it? Because first of all, it's not a rescue. Jonathan Reynolds is at pains to try and point out that they know what they're doing, which of course they don't. The coke that is needed to fire up the furnace in the first place is not actually in the country yet, as far as we know. It's still on a ship, which has to be brought in from overseas because we closed down the only coke manufacturing facility left in this country. So, you know, this whole disingenuous nonsense of, you know, we've all come back on Saturday to solve all problems and we've fixed everything. Well, they haven't fixed anything, have they?
I mean, I just found that all so ludicrously theatrical. You know, they had so many weeks and months, in fact years, to know that this problem was brewing, and then at the absolute past the 11th hour they theatrically summon MPs from all over the country to go and sit in Parliament, knowing that it's going to create a big drama and a big positive headline about Labour saving the steel industry that it's done absolutely nothing to prop up. And you're right to point out that it was the Tories that made that disastrous decision, you know, to allow the Chinese to take over this thing. And meanwhile, I read over the weekend that we're importing 50,000 tons of coal from Japan.
Yeah.
Did I read that right?
From Japan, which is a net importer of coal. It's not even their coal we're buying.
I mean, just look at the geography of that. I don't know where they get it from, Australia or something. I mean, Australia actually still does produce this stuff.
Yeah. I think they buy much of it from China and India, so it might end up being Chinese coal, ironically.
Would not surprise me at all. The whole thing is a complete and utter mess, as is the bin situation, quite literally. What, the army are being brought in, but they're just going to sit in a tent, aren't they? advisory capacity. I just want to see people clearing this stuff. It feels to me such a failure of leadership and in a sense a community failure. As you've pointed out, there's only a handful of people on strike.
Yeah.
Understand no one wants to do a load more for a load less. I mean, a lot of us having to do that all the time.
Yeah.
But I understand why bin men might be pretty hacked off with that. But are you really telling me that the whole of Birmingham doesn't have a bunch more suitably qualified people that could step in, offer them 2 or 3 times the money just to step in and resolve the crisis while something else is worked out? I mean, just leaving it there to mount up like little black Mount Everest.
It's awful. It's horrific. And it does, and I mean, it's more than just, for me, symbolic of what happened in the 1970s. It reminds me of it because that's exactly what happened in the 1970s. And it was the beginning of the end of the Labour government because, people need certain things done. It doesn't matter how rich you are. If you're not getting your bins emptied, it's a mess. It's horrible. There's vermin everywhere. It stinks. Your quality of life is immediately reduced by a factor of 100, in the same way that, if the crime on the streets is not controlled, it starts to eat away at the very heart of the country, as it's now doing. If immigration is not controlled, all of the things that lead to our quality of life deteriorating, and you know better than anybody why that's happened. It's the beginning of the end. There's going to be more strikes this summer. We've got more migrants coming than ever. We've got a civil service which is completely sort of holed below the waterline. We've got services like the NHS which can't be fixed. I don't know where we go with this stuff.
I don't know, Mike. We've got council elections coming up, so people can maybe try to make a difference by how they vote. But I don't know, this morning I just feel profoundly upset about all of this. We have such a great country.
Yeah.
The country's got so much going for it. Look at all the wonderful things about Britain, and yet we're just destroying it with this stuff. We're destroying it through incompetence. We're destroying it through ignorance. We're abusing our institutions. You played that clip earlier of the ridiculous situation where we've infantilized our population to the extent that they call the police when someone says either speak English or speak clearly. I don't know which one of those things it is.
Right.
That's playground stuff in a nursery. 2 or 3-year-olds, that kind of exchange would not need to involve even the kindergarten teacher, never mind diverting our police for that kind of nonsense. How have we got ourselves into this position?
Yeah. Well, apparently we've been led by the politicians and led by local councils and led by this kind of wokeism that has infected every single civil service department, it seems to me. I mean, this morning, as I say, there's a story in the Telegraph about the NHS putting non-white people at the front of the queue for all sorts of things. We've got Greater Manchester Police literally walking up to ethnic minorities in the street, asking them if they want to become police officers. Police in West Yorkshire talk about slavery and how they should respect black people and all of this and apologise for the way they've been treated. I mean, that's how we got here, because we've now got an infantilised police service, it seems to me.
I can't imagine the police want to be doing this kind of work, truly. I mean, who joins the police?
I disagree. I think the people who have joined the police in recent times are these people. They're the ones who want to be very sure that nobody's committing hate crime because that's the most important thing that's wrecking Britain. I think they genuinely believe that, cobblers, because they've learned it at university.
Well, if that is the case, then we're well and truly screwed, because then, a change of leadership isn't going to make a difference for a bit longer than I'd like it to. Yeah. Perhaps there's a generational thing here, and you've got an old guard of cops that really don't want to be wasting their time going up to people saying, did you say speak English? Because it could be a hate crime. And maybe you've got a younger intake, perhaps the ones that have been recruited via positive discrimination, whose whole culture and outlook on the world is one of endless grievance and victim state. We have got to change a kind of public mindset here, the mindset where people continually looking to someone else because they've got a grievance, they feel that they're owed something. That is a really, really corrosive culture. People have got to learn that they've got to get out and shape their own destiny, rather than endlessly saying, well, I am where I am because of white privilege and colonialism and slavery. I mean, all this is an absolute load of nonsense, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, because it might be ridiculous and people might be listening to this going, yeah, silly old fool, like the times have changed. But I grew up under Thatcher, in the early 80s when she was in charge of Britain. There was a real kind of sense of can do. It was like, the world is your oyster, you go and do whatever the hell you like and you can be a success. And that was very much how people felt. And that was very much how the world was in those times. I went to America when I was 23. I lived under Ronald Reagan for 7 or 8 years. It was fantastic, and I worry that people have lost. I don't think that's changed. I think you can still have a great life and you can still be successful in this country. But I think people are frightened of doing it because they've been told not to.
Well, there's a bit of that, but I also think that if you make the safety net so vast and so incredibly all encompassing, then people lose their motivation.
Yeah.
It's like when you've got very rich people who give their children a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
No surprise that the children don't go off and make their own future for themselves because they don't have to. It's not actually doing your kid any favour, much as it's lovely as a parent to be able to make life easier than you had it. So if you say to a population, don't worry, we're always here for you, even if you're having a bit of an off period in your life, you're feeling a bit blue, don't worry, you can claim mental health benefit, we'll give you a car, etc. Then it basically diminishes personal responsibility. And this is an ideological discussion. It comes back to the basics of, do you believe that people should be self-reliant and that they can create the best lives for themselves if given the right opportunity and the education? Or do you think it's the job of the state to kind of swoop everybody up, tell them what to do and give them handouts? And we're in the second category and have been for a very long time.
And it's the government that also perpetuates that myth, because the government more or less says, we will take over and we will take over your life, we'll take over your steel industry, we'll take over, everything else possible that we can to make your life better. Well, no, I don't want you to do that, thanks. I'd rather just do it myself. And so would the rest of the country, because you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they had to step in, otherwise that would have been game over, I guess. But, it comes back to whether or not we have any confidence in it.
Well, guess what? It might be game over anyway. And I mean, one of the things that was, the holding pattern apparently was that we didn't want to be the only G7 nation that didn't produce its own steel. Well, if all we produce is green steel, we might as well not bother.
Well, that is also true, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sorry to leave you on the same line that we started off on. So I've got nothing else I can give you other than a funny story, which isn't funny. £500,000 spent by credit cards used by civil servants on trips around the world. Fact-finding missions, basically, many of them. Select committees, groups of MPs and civil servants who have scrutinised Whitehall departments go on fact-finding missions, but they always find themselves in places like Barbados and Dominica. They never find themselves in sort of, Krakow or, anywhere cold and dark in the middle of winter. They always seem to find themselves in the Caribbean.
I mean, this is a bit of a shift because now MPs are incredibly paranoid about going anywhere like that. Even if there was some kind of apparent justification for it, they don't dare go on anything that could be classified as what you and I might call a junket or a jolly. But it seems that the shift has been towards the civil service doing it because they know that they'll get away with it because they're faceless. We don't know who they are. One way or another, it's basically more jollying at taxpayers' expense. Yeah,
absolutely right. Isabel, I'm sorry I couldn't give you more good news this morning. We'll see what we can do through the rest of the week as we get our way through towards Easter. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor there.